that if you go to whyagain.org and click on Start Here, and then scroll down, there's, of course, the two that we use most often, but if you scroll on down, there's a section that says Reality Management Wake-Up Sheets, many versions. And so then if you just click on the Stress Reality Management, you'll see that there are, the ones that we currently use, there's examples, but then there's a link or information for the app. And then if you scroll on down, there's the forgiveness pattern that Susan was talking and had mentioned to Dr. Tim that he uses. And then there's a large print. And then if you scroll on down, there's the 8 or 9 worksheets that are out of Julie Haverstick's book, Healing Children, Loving Children. And then there's the original book, the original worksheet that's out of the book. And then there are 12 steps, 11 steps. There's a lot of worksheets out there. So if one doesn't seem to work for you, try another one. I actually just did a session with a gentleman, and we use even though, we're both adults, we use, when we're working together, the one out of Julie's book that is Work It Out Sheet number 7. And, they're just simpler worksheets. And so until you get used to using the worksheets, you may want to pick a different one to play with until you build the brain cells. And so, give all that a shot. Give it a try. And Michael has joined us, so I'm going to say welcome, Michael. I don't know if you had trouble. I got kicked off a while ago, and it took me about 3 times to get back in. But we have several callers on the switchboard. Nobody has a hand up. But welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. It's interesting. I am on the road. So I've moved from Sarasota up to Largo, Florida, and I'm in a room that some friends invited me to come and stay with them, and it's kind of like an echo chamber. I don't know if you can hear it through my microphone, but it's kind of interesting. Little echo
you're loud
here.
and clear.
Oh, good. So it's interesting to be on the road and connecting with folks. Some of you who are listening might remember Daniel and J.J. Lyman from Heartland way back in the earliest days. We were talking today, trying to think of when the last time I saw them. It's been several years. So they live here in Largo, and I fly out Saturday morning from St. Pete Airport, or pardon me, from Tampa Airport, one of them around here somewhere, back to Bristol. And so Daniel's going to take me. I've got a friend here, Patrick McGann, who you've heard on the show. He's a fellow naturopath, and we're going to do some work together while we're here, and just all things rock and roll. And so, Miss Jeannie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up? Anything happening in the chat room? How's everybody doing? Anyone have a question or a thought for us? And by the way, those worksheets, one of the things that I've seen many people do over the years is they'll rotate, because each worksheet, and the reason why there are many of them on the website, is over a period of decades, literally, I've experimented with what is most effective that people will use in terms of the forgiveness process. So each one has maybe a slightly different idea, slightly different twist to it, and it can help the mind to access things different. I was talking to someone this morning and talking about how important it is to, when you're using the forgiveness process, to really identify what the goal is that's driving the pained perception at any given moment. That we can do a worksheet around something, but we're not really getting to the core of the issue, because our goals, we're looking at goals that are not really relative to what's really going on. So, use an example. I've got somebody who owes me $10,000, and I say, I'm really upset that Bill hasn't paid me my $10,000. So I could do a worksheet, canceling my need for Bill to pay me my $10,000. But if the issue is one where Bill's not honoring me as a friend, the real worksheet that's going to produce the healing result will be to recognize that what I wanted from Bill was for him to honor me as a friend. And when I do that worksheet, that's going to take me to the core unconscious dynamic. You'll remember that statement that Jung gave us. And that is that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. We'll think something out there is out to get us. But in fact, we're directing the process. We're directing what is resonated into our space from within. So he goes on to say, those who look without dream. In other words, if you have a picture painted on the inside of your eyeballs that you think is out there, you're stuck in a dream. Nothing is resolvable in the dream. You can rearrange the deck chairs in the Titanic, and maybe you get to listen to the band a little clearer, but the ship's going down. When you utilize the true forgiveness process from the first century Aramaic language and teachings of the man Yeshua, then you recognize that pained perception is a product of something that's happening on the inside, not a result of something that took place on the outside. And trying to resolve something in the outside that's really an inside job doesn't get you anywhere. So really identifying precisely the goal that's involved. And any given pained construct in the mind might have 20 different goals behind it, might have many different things that come together to create this construct in the mind that says, I'm upset about that out there, but the underlying dynamics of that construct are what really need to be resolved. So those who look without dream. If you think the problem's out there, you're in a dream. And those who look within awaken. And this man Yeshua 2,000 years ago gave specific, precise technology for making, as Carl Jung called for it, making the unconscious conscious. And that's pretty profound when you think that technology is 2,000 years old. That every time that you're in any form of upset, if you'll use the forgiveness process, then you will be able to touch into precisely what the core of the issue is and begin its dissolution with no need nor ability to figure it out.
And you have a hand up.
That's the beauty of the forgiveness process. Well, let's say hello.
It is 4:04. I believe this is Chris. Welcome.
Hi all. I guess I have a
hey,
couple
young
of
man.
questions.
Good to hear your voice. How are you?
Well, Michael, I guess I have a couple of questions regards what you recently said. The hypothetical situation of the man who owes you $10,000 and forgiveness. On a practical level, do you initiate some collection service on him for the money, or is that you forget about that? At the same time, you're doing the forgiveness.
Yeah. The key would be, and it relates, actually, I just had this question from someone yesterday, and it's a similar question. Somebody says, well, I'm in this relationship, and it's messy, and it's nasty, and, does this mean I can't leave? It's like, no. Anybody can make the choice to leave anytime they want a relationship. We just advise that if you're going to do that, you make sure you keep doing your work, because you're going to have to turn around and create the whole circumstance all over again with somebody else. And in the case of, let's say, this $10,000, I don't cancel my goal for the $10,000 because I don't want the money. Obviously, I want the $10,000 that he owes me. But when I recognize that if I load that goal for him to pay me what he owes me, and my mind responds with some form of corrupt data, some form of hostility or fear, I have work to do. And I want to do my work until I clean that up. So I'm going to do my work to clean that part of my mind up. And, once I do a worksheet, and I realize, gee, I've got a lot of rage about not being honored, then I do the next worksheet about being honored. And once I clean that out, and I turn around and, of course, I still want my $10,000, so I'm going to load that goal in my mind again. And if my mind comes up clean and clear, then I'm free of it and move forward. In the meantime, certainly if the moral imperative is that the money is truly honestly owed, and I wish to collect it, certainly it's perfectly appropriate to hold somebody accountable. Oftentimes people think or express that, well, if I'm forgiving, that means I can't hold the person accountable. That means I have to, and they put a whole list of things. Oh, you mean I have to go back into relationship with them? No, I didn't say that. You may choose never to see them again. But you work on cleaning up your mind. Elsewise, you realize that if there is a disintegrative energy within your own physiology, within your own mind, one, there's a disease process happening in your body. And two, if you get rid of the person who triggers it for you, you go on into the world. You've heard me in a workshop before ask the question, how many have ever taken the geographic cure where you go to the other side of the country where people look different? And the person that picks you up at the airport finishes the sentence of the person that dropped you off started. How do they know what to say to me? Literally, I am continuously, energetically telegraphing every issue that I hold. And if somebody with a matching bag of garbage, the matching issue, comes into my space, then there's going to be an attraction between us. We're going to be drawn to each other. And so, absolutely, hold people accountable. The thing is, if I have to hold people accountable out of hostility or fear, I am causing myself a disease process with that hostility or fear. And my mind is in some kind of blatant error because hostility and fear-based perceptions are always based in corrupt data. And so the idea is I'm going to clean up my mind, and absolutely it's appropriate to hold people accountable.
Okay, thank you. That was, clarity was important for me. I have another question. Are there lands that still speak Aramaic? I think I saw YouTube. Is there a center of the world where fluent Aramaic is still spoken? And then also, is it closely enough related to that of Yeshua's that that language that they speak today is important? And then I also would ask you how many. You know a lot of Aramaic words, but I guess are you fluent or do you speak a little of it? And also, where in the world is it spoken?
Right. Well, first question, there's a community in Chicago, an Aramaic-speaking community in Chicago. There's one out in Southern California. I don't know of any others in the United States, but there probably are many. About, probably, I think it was maybe 12 years ago, we flew to Sweden. We were speaking in Sweden and in Denmark. And where we were going, we really didn't have any idea. We had rented an Airbnb, and we ended up taking a train there. And when we got off of the train, it was a bit of a walk to the Airbnb, and I needed to get a haircut, so I went in right as we came off the train. There was a haircutting salon. So I went in and said, "Hey, I'd like to get my hair cut." And he said, "Well, here, have a seat." And we get talking, and he asked why we're in town. And so we're doing some workshops on Aramaic forgiveness. He's like, "Oh, I speak Aramaic." Really? So we end up with a whole conversation, and unknown to us, we landed right smack dab in the middle of a refugee community in Sweden of people who'd been displaced in the Mideast. And it was kind of fun and interesting. There was a gentleman that, while we were talking, he stopped cutting my hair for a moment, and he went and made a phone call. And this guy shows up who is just this sweet Aramaic-speaking man. He doesn't speak any English, but when Jeannie and I were there, he adopted us. He was like, he took care of us. He shepherded us around. At one point, he got his daughter to come and translate. We ended up going to and speaking to a group at a church that they belong to. So there are communities all over the world. It's still very much a live language, and there are several communities in the Mideast that still speak Aramaic.
That's the one. That's the one I was wondering about, where, I'm sure it obviously originated in the Middle East, so the Mideast. So, and is that community or is that region there are they the longest speaking? Have they been there since Yeshua's time?
Since antiquity.
And haven't been displaced.
Correct.
And it's their same location. They haven't been displaced.
I'm not aware. As far as I know, they're still in their original homeland. Actually, if you go back a couple of thousand years, the Aramaic language back then was very much like English is today. You know, we can go just about anywhere in the world, and the language of business is English. And, you know, we could find English-speaking people just about in any country in the world. And at that point, you could have, 2,000 years ago, you could have gone from the Middle East and walked to the Great Wall of China, and virtually everybody that you met would have spoken Aramaic. It was the language of the day.
I have another question on another subject. Last week or the week before, you had brief mention and discussion about male infant circumcision. What are your feelings? What are your feelings on that? And whether it's how do you feel about whether that's right or wrong, or whatever feelings you have on it?
Well,
I didn't derive enough from the short things that you said.
Mm-hmm. Well, the original idea of, if you look in the scriptures, the circumcision of the heart, it was about clearing up an unconscious mind that was out of alignment with truth. And then because of cultural practices in the Middle East at that time, it was something that was picked up as a physical thing that was done to young babies. And I consider, we've heard a lot about female genital mutilation that has happened in the world. And, pretty much everybody considers it criminal. Unfortunately, male genital mutilation is not considered criminal. I think it should be.
Well, I agree with you. I discovered this subject maybe 25 years ago, and it was kind of a revelation for me because I'm just kind of look for different ideas of what's going on in the world. I mean,
just accepted.
I look at lots of different issues. Okay, another question.
It's a mega dollar business.
Yes.
And that's what it is. It's a business. There is absolutely no reason for sanitary. People use the excuse of sanitary. There is no reason for sanitary reasons. And the original scriptural idea was circumcision of the heart, was to cut away what did not belong. It wasn't about mutilating a boy's genitals. And
there's a couple
taking
other
power over him by inflicting pain as his first sexual experience.
You know what? I was just about to say the same thing. I don't know whether they use anesthetic anymore, but there was a period in American history where they didn't, and it provides for hideous pain for an infant that needs nothing but love from its mother. And without the infant being able to understand that, it can cause later in life mental dysfunction. And then the other aspect, which I think
as well as physical.
Well, yes, I think there is. I don't know. I haven't found any studies yet, but in terms of like sexual dysfunction, I think that's a part of it as well. Another question. So I'm starting to understand about releasing, I can use my own terminology, the demons of past generation of your ancestors that are stuck in you through the DNA. But what do you think about repaying the concept that may be alien to your beliefs? I don't know. The concept of repaying karma debt in this life for something that you did wrong in a past life, that is if you believe in reincarnation. And I know that's a separate subject from what you're talking about.
I got it.
Okay.
Well, I used to be a used karma salesman, so I understand that one really well. and I think the law of karma is absolute, And it's nothing more, the way it's expressed in the Western scriptures is sowing and reaping. If you sow an energy, if you put a frequency into structure, you're going to play it out. Now, that doesn't mean you're condemned to play it out. That means that if you have the technology with which to remove that which you've sown, then you don't have to play it out. You don't have to reap it.
Right,
and that's where the forgiveness process comes in.
But is that from your ancestors, your ancestral line, and the DNA, or could it also be from a previous you that was reincarnated from another time?
Well,
how do you feel?
My take is that may be one explanation. Either of those explanations may be totally and completely accurate. And to me, the belief in reincarnation, over the years, I've worked with people who've had some pretty traumatic things going on in their lives. And when they had what they considered to be a past life memory come forward, and they forgave us to that memory, they freed themselves of that karma, of that situation. So my take would be that I can easily see that if my mind presents this as a past life thing, then it may just be my creative mind giving me an issue that I need to deal with and a way that I can deal with it, that my belief system will help me to handle it. So to me, it isn't necessary to either believe in it or not believe in it. Over the years, if somebody has a past life memory, what they consider to be a past life memory come up, then I simply suggest that they work with it and work through it. You know, I've worked with probably the most dramatic example, and I've seen people make mega changes in their lives when they dealt with what their mind presented them as a past life situation. And I could easily see, again, it could be the mind giving a creative way to deal with something. It could be a genetic memory, family, history type thing. And whatever it is, if it formulates a construct in the mind, a reality that's based in some sort of pain, then applying forgiveness is the removal of it, which to me, again, would be the removal of what was called karma. I don't have to live it out if it's not in me anymore. However, if I don't face it and deal with it, then I'm going to get to play it out. Probably the most dramatic effect that I've ever seen of someone doing a piece of work that to them was a past life memory is I used to have a practice there in Atlanta, and there was a gentleman who was an attorney, and he was from a very prominent Atlanta family, big-time attorneys. His father owned one of the larger legal offices in the city of Atlanta, and he was an extremely intellectual man, very atheistic in his thinking, and Jewish. And I say that to just give a sense of, for this guy to come and see me, you got to know it's pretty desperate. But he came to do some private work with me as a result of an invitation to him from a friend who had worked with me. And during one of our sessions, he was going through a lot of trauma. He had been married to a woman who he divorced about 10 years earlier, had 2 children with him. In his words, his daughter hated him, and he hadn't even touched his son since he was an infant. And his wife didn't have 2 words or his former wife didn't have 2 words to say to him. He came to me because he'd been in a relationship for several years with a woman who 6 months earlier initiated a divorce against him, and his life was just totally and completely falling apart. I mean, he was a nervous wreck. He couldn't work. His bank account was empty. His life was falling apart. And so he came to see me. We did some processing work, did a worksheet, and then we did some still point breathing. And when he went into the still point breathing process, he had a memory of himself, what presented itself as a memory of himself laying in a sarcophagus about to be buried. And there were people there for his funeral service, but he wasn't dead. But his body, had no way to give any sign that he was alive, and they were going to bury him. And his wife was there, and he had the thought that if she's the only one that I may be able to somehow communicate with so that she knows that I'm still alive and I'm still here. And she left, and he died. Now, this is a guy who's an intellectual, very atheist kind of guy. And when he went through that experience of dying in what his mind presented as a past life experience, I asked him the question, so, Barry, who are you? And all he could say, and I probably went round robin with him about 10 times in this experience, who are you? And his only reply, having come from a previous atheistic mind, his reply was, I don't know, but I am. Like he was really sure that he had died, but he was really sure that he still existed. So we finished our session, and he left my office. My office was up in Buckhead. And he had to stop and get gas. And this he shared with me a couple of days later. He drove about 2 miles from my office and stopped to get gas. He had had 3 relationships in his life. The 2 that he'd shared with me, the woman who was divorcing him and the woman he'd divorced about 10 years earlier. And he'd had a high school sweetheart. At the gas station where he stops to get gas is his high school sweetheart, who he hasn't seen since high school. This is like, 20 minutes after leaving my office. It's his day to go and pick his kids up from his former wife's home and spend time with them, take them to dinner. He goes, knocks on the door, and for the first time in the 10 years they've been divorced, she invites him into the house. She's never done that. When he steps into the house, she gives him a kiss on the cheek and says, everything's really okay, isn't it? The first decent words that she's spoken to him in 10 years. He takes the kids, they go to dinner. They're at the mall, walking through the mall, and the woman who was divorcing him, and he realized after the session that he had been saying since she initiated the divorce that he could not live without her. The memory that surfaced was of him being in a sarcophagus. Everybody thinks he's dead. And the woman who was his wife who left, at least in the way his mind presented it, was the same woman who was divorcing him. And he did die in that circumstance, in that memory. And he realized he had said several times since she initiated divorce that I can't live without her. And to just think about her or to see her was for him to just go into a total emotional breakdown. He's walking through the mall with his 2 kids, and there she is, and he's able to go over and say hello and give her a hug and walk away with no emotional impact or disturbance whatsoever. Took the kids to dinner, took them back home. His daughter, who he said hates me, said, hey, Dad, how about next week my boyfriend and I come over and cook dinner for you? And he said, my son grabbed me and hugged me, and I didn't think he was ever going to let go of me. That was all within a period of a 5-hour soul point session where he touched into what his mind presented to him as a past life memory of dying in a sarcophagus. So that's the kind of results I've seen when someone deals with what comes. Now, again, was it a past? I don't know. Again, I can easily see or explain that it was just his mind creatively showing him a way to deal with an issue that otherwise he was having difficulty dealing with.
Well, that is absolutely fascinating. Okay, I have another question for you. If you were to go to Greece and lecture at a university on the subject of Aramaic as opposed to Greek,
I probably wouldn't be very much appreciated.
And the problem with the Greek language lost in translation, losing in translation the meaning of the Aramaic, how do you think you would be received?
Well, when you ask that question, I think about the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Did you ever see that?
No, I've heard of it. I should, though.
Well, it's a fun movie to watch. It really is an excellent movie. But the father of the bride in that, every time something, unique or wonderful comes up, he assures her that the Greeks invented it. We own it. We invented it. Yes, that was the Greeks. We did it. So that's what comes to mind. And my take, they call what the Greeks did translation. I would not put what the Greeks called their translations of the ancient scriptures into the category of a translation. They are not translations, they are interpretations. If you have a word, let's just take an example here. If you have a word called forgiveness, and forgiveness is a tool in Aramaic with which you go inside your own mind and remove the root of any current trauma you're aware of, and somebody comes along and takes that word forgiveness and quote unquote translates it into pardoning. Oh, if there's a painful thing moving in me, I'm going to let you off the hook for that painful thing. For me, that's not a translation. That's an interpretation. And if you look at just about every key word in the ancient Aramaic teachings, love, forgiveness, we could go on and on and on, law, every one of those words have been turned backwards. So I don't put anything that I see in the Greek into the category of translation. It's interpretation.
Wow, that's
so I probably wouldn't be very well received. Unless there were people whose interest was in truth. If they were interested in honoring truth, I think it'd be acceptable anywhere. But if they're interested in protecting a belief system, then it's going to be pretty tough to swallow.
I think I remember this from a conversation I had on your phone line show before, and
right.
I just want to get it right. So you're it's basically a handicap of the Greek language and its structure and the meanings of its word and probably grammar as well. I suppose Greek civilization has something. I don't know much about it. We learned something in high school, Plato and Socrates and all those guys. I suppose they do have something to offer the world. I mean, with their traditions of philosophy. But I can't boast any of that.
My take and my offering would be this. There are those who function strictly and solely out of the mind of man, out of carbon-based memory, out of the body's mind. If you go to the ancient scriptures, there were two alternatives. There were alternative minds. There was the mind of man, and then there was the mind of love, or the mind of the Creator. One was called the mind of Christ, and one was called the mind of man. The mind of man, man being Adamos, red clay, means that this memory bank stored information from generation upon generation upon generation upon generation. Whatever comes out of that stored information and is built into a construct, a picture, a perception by the mind, is a massaged picture of something from the past, massaged into looking like it's the present. That's my take. And so someone who's working in that arena, compared to somebody being at the bottom of the barrel in the mind of man, if someone's doing some pretty good stuff, relatively speaking, then they're on a much higher level than someone who's at the bottom of the barrel. However, if you're on the Titanic and you're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic and you get closer to the band, you might hear the music a little better, but the ship's still going down. So my take is anything that's moving, manipulating things in the mind of man, life can improve if you do some repairs there, but it's still the past replicated. And in the Aramaic language, the word that was used to describe living from that mind was the word Satan. Now, another one of those misinterpretations, Satan has been made into this dude with the red suit, the tail, and the pitchfork. But in Aramaic, there's a passage where Yeshua precisely defines what he means by Satan, and that is just after he comes out of the Garden of Gethsemane, he's facing Peter, who's just attacked the high priest's servant. And Peter's going to stop him from following through with what his plan is, and Yeshua literally directly calls Peter Satan. He says, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And he's talking to Peter. And he says, and he defines what he means by Satan. "For you think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God." In other words, you're stuck in carbon-based memory. So, in carbon-based memory, if you took this chunk of meat that we have called a body-mind unit and took it into the lab and asked somebody to do a chemical analysis of it, what's the base element here? They tell you that base element in your body, the base element in my body is carbon. And if you look at a natural carbon atom, what you have is 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons. You might remember that number 666. There was the mind of love, the actual mind of the Creator that's available to us, that's designed for us to use, and we can live in and live out of that mind. That was called the mind of Christ. Or carbon-based memory, what goes against living in the mind connected to love is what's stored from the generations in carbon-based memory that's based in hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, drama, and drama. So can somebody therapy that mind and make it a little better, a little more functional? Yes, absolutely. But they're just two different realms. And it's kind of like, east is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet. To heal, you've heard me say it oftentimes on the radio show, to heal, you've got to be out of your mind. And most of us are controlled by the generational patterns stored in carbon-based memory from the past. And we're designed to live in the mind of active present love in the present. That make sense?
Yes, thank you, Michael. I'm glad I was able to get all these varied questions on different but related subjects, and thanks for your time.
Well, delighted. I'm glad you're doing your work to be able to come up with the questions. That's half of the battle. So I'm delighted to hear from you and delighted that you're refining your questioning process and moving forward. And of course, when you look at the forgiveness process, what's it all about? It's about collapsing the output of carbon-based memory, collapsing the output of the mind of man and returning to the truth of who we are. Functioning out of that mind which was called the mind of Christ. And Christ, by the way, in Aramaic is not the name of a person. It's the name of an office. So when they said Yeshua the Christ, it was an office that he occupied, and actually literally means the buttered one. They anointed someone who was spiritually awake with oils or butter, literally the buttered one. And so, in the same way, let's say here I am, I'm in Largo, Florida right now. Let's say I run for mayor and I win the position of mayor. You would address me perhaps as Mayor Michael. Mayor would not be part of my name. It's just the office that I occupy. So Yeshua occupied the office of Christ, and as you can, as any one of us can, to be in that mind that was in Christ. And that's not a religious idea. It's literally that we're designed to function out of a mind connected to active present love 24/7, 365. Our cellular structure is designed to be fueled by active present love 24/7, 365. And if something else is running it, some form of corrupt data, hostility, or fear, then the function of the whole thing is compromised. And it's about restoring us to our full original function as human beings. And to have a human life, love has to be active and present in human physiology. People look at what they call a body and say, well, there's a human being. Not necessarily. Just because there's a form doesn't mean there's an active human life in there. In order for there to be an actual human being, there has to be the active presence of love in that human form. would be my offering. And the whole objective of this work is literally to delete, to remove everything based in hostility or fear, every bit of corrupt data, and make of this a virgin space. You know, the whole story of the Immaculate Conception is to make of our own body-mind unit a virgin space that contains no corrupt data, so that when we as love take and operate through this system, whatever it is we're focused on, whatever it is we originate as love, comes out in pure form through us, because there's nothing in us to taint with hostility or fear the purity of that presence of love. And that's what we're designed to function as human beings, would be my offering. And so any form of hostility or fear becomes a fit subject for removal, for forgiveness. So I'm glad you're on the path and refining these questions. That's some great questions. Any other thoughts?
Oh, I'll probably come up with something.
Great. Well, keep notes and call. You know, call as often as you can, as often as you want. That's what we're here for. I love it. It gives us an opportunity to open things up. Everybody's whose wisdom is asking questions contributes to the wisdom of everybody on the show. So much appreciated. So any other thoughts for you, sir?
No, not right now, Michael.
All right.
I'm glad I was able to get everything in. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'm glad you were too. Delighted. Appreciate the questions. Have a blessed one.
And Yinka's in the chat room, and she said they're really helpful questions for me. Gave me some answers to a discussion that I had today. And so since Yinka's in the room, that made me think today at 3:30 Eastern Time, 8:30 London time, is the Global Book Club. For the Zoom information in the notes for today.
So if anybody wants to join us in about 2.5 hours, let's see, when we finish the show, it'll be 2 o'clock, so an hour and a half, 3:30 Eastern Time, we'll be getting on Zoom, and Jeannie's putting the Zoom link in the notes so you can access it. To get to the notes when we finish the show, you would go to our website, whyagain.org, and in the middle of the page, you'll see a microphone. If you click on that microphone and just drill down to today's show, you just go back through the links. It'll take you through year by year, month, etc., date. Then that link will be in the notes. And if at 3:30 today you click that link, you'll be joining us for the session we're going to do with the Hear My Voice Global Book Club out of London, England. So we're doing that at 3:30. And so hopefully now, I mean, we're down to, what, about 20 minutes or so, something a little less than that? Hopefully, yeah, less than 15. That conversation perhaps resonated a few other questions for folks. And so if you're out there in listener land...
It's no coincidence that what you're going to talk about in the book club's chapter 19, it's called Inherited Patterns, and that was part of what your all's conversation was.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, that's what we'll be doing with the Global Book Club. So if you've got the space, jump on, grab the link, the Zoom link, and join us at 3:30 Eastern Time. Other than that, if you're on, if you're listening and you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you're listening to the show directly. And then if you push 1, that raises a hand in the control panel, and we'll be having a conversation. So if you're out there in listener land, what's moving for you? What's on your mind? How can we support you? Anybody got a question for us on anything we've talked about today or anything related to this idea of first century Aramaic forgiveness being a tool with which you go inside yourself and literally remove the very capacity for any form of hostility or fear? I was talking to a gentleman today, he actually picked me up down in Sarasota and drove me up here. And we were talking about this whole idea of the Aramaic and the process of forgiveness, and that the whole world is locked into this game of, I have pain in me, therefore somebody else must be the problem, and I'm going to let them off the hook for the pain that's in me. And that's a Greek idea of pardoning, which can be a nice thing to do, but it has nothing whatsoever to do with forgiveness. Again, that's why I say the Greek is not a translation. It is an interpretation. When you take the tool with which you can go inside your mind, collapse pain perception in on itself, and heal, and you turn that into letting other people off the hook, you've got an interpretation that totally destroys the core of the teaching. What we're looking to do is to reestablish the core of the understanding from the Aramaic language. And it's interesting, you know, in the Middle East, the Persian Empire lived in harmony with all of its neighbors for a period of 3,000 years under the Aramaic language. It is a language of understanding how to create a life of serenity and connectedness to love. Different from all the rest of the babble of the world. And the core tool, again, is that of forgiveness. So if you're out there in listener land, how can we support you? What's on your mind? Got a question for us? 563-999-3581. Push 1, raise his hand in the control panel, and we'll have a conversation. So, Ms. Jean, do we have anybody out there in the phone queue with a hand up, or anything happening in the chat room? Or Yinka? Yinka, with what you were just saying, that what's resolved for you, does that raise any other refinements, any other questions? If so, hop in the chat room and let's talk about it. So, Ms. Jeannie, do we have anything happening out there?
So far, it's really quiet. We have a lot of listeners today.
Cool. Well, then I'm going to jump into a little piece that I wrote.
Oh, a hand just went up again.
Oh, okay, great.
It's Chris, 404.
Okay. Yeah, I
it's been so long.
From what you just said, I came up with a few thoughts that I'd like. The history interests me,
right.
And it helps me to learn more about, I'm going to call them techniques or studies about forgiveness. If the history, the background, the world history of it fascinates me also. I connect the two, right, and I can become more enthusiastic. As far as I know, and I don't know that much about Middle Eastern history, Persia, Iran is what was Persia at one time. Now, I don't know if Iran is an Aramaic speaking center of the world. As far as I know, they speak Arabic.
Farsi is the language today.
Right, Farsi.
In Iran.
So is that...
And actually, the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, is available to download free from our website in Farsi.
Okay, so is Farsi close to Aramaic?
You know, I don't know the relationship or how close those two languages are. I just don't know.
That would be interesting to know. I mean, you see what's in the news right now with the very tense, potentially hostile
right.
situation between Iran and you know who.
Yes.
For me to come up with a better understanding of what's going on today, perhaps it would be good for me to look into the history of Iran and their language, perhaps being related to Aramaic, and I could derive from that what I would think to be the demeanor of this country, Iran, presently, which is stacked up against some serious potential warfare.
Right, and
anyway.
it's interesting that basically the warfare is between brothers. It's an ancient family squabble. Are you on our mailing list? Or do you get our newsletter?
I do believe so.
Okay, well, we sent one out just a week or so ago. Yeah, an email. It would have come from Constant Contact. And if you haven't got it, I'll send it to you. But I just finished writing an article on addressing the conflict in the Middle East and looking at, a lot of people in the world today are talking about conflict resolution. We need conflict resolution. Well, actually, conflict resolution, while it can be helpful, it can be something like a drug, where a drug can be helpful. It can help to heal, to disappear symptoms, but it doesn't necessarily connect to actual healing. And in the same way, rather than conflict resolution, what we need is actual healing in the minds that source the conflict that's going on. And so I've got an article that I wrote on that topic, and if you don't have it, I'll gladly email it to you.
Okay, but while we're still on the phone, what you're saying is that if every Israeli, every Palestinian, every Iranian started doing the work as you've been describing it over and over in your call here and in previous calls, the diplomatic solution would be a piece of cake.
Yeah, all of the solutions that the world offers, let's give them this much money, let's do this, let's do that, let's make up for this. That's not what's required. Because, they've had lots of solutions and lots of things have happened, but that doesn't do the healing work of the underlying conflict created by the minds that are locked into hostility or fear.
Right, I guess so, because even though there were the Oslo Accords and the Camp David Accord with Sadat and Rabin and Jimmy Carter, which appeared to be diplomatic successes and could lead to peace in that region, I guess basically they didn't work, is what we're seeing right now.
Well, without healing, the conflict goes on.
Evidenced by what we're seeing now, Oslo and Camp David basically didn't work because they were conventional diplomatic solutions.
Right. Yeah, we have two people and we say, there's a problem here. Okay, let's solve the problem. So we solve the problem. Let's say it's that thing I talked about when I started. Somebody owes me $10,000, and so that's my issue. So somebody comes along and says, I have the $10,000 for you here, the debt's paid. But remember, the secondary worksheet that I spoke about is what I really wanted from Bill was for him to honor me. Giving me the $10,000 doesn't heal the part of me that's feeling dishonored. So what's going to happen? I'm going to go through life and I'm going to interpret somebody else as dishonoring me, and I'm going to be back in the same old battle again. What's needed is a healing of the underlying dynamics of each mind involved in a conflict, rather than resolving the external problems, which people would think, well, gee, that problem's been resolved. Yes, but that problem isn't the problem. That's just a symptom of the problem. What you need to do is go back and deal with the cause. And in that situation where I'm not feeling honored, yeah, I got my $10,000, but it didn't heal that in me, and I'm going to have to find somebody else to play that out with. Bill on another day, or you, or Harry, or Mary, or somebody else. And so what we need in each situation, whether it's a private family conflict, whether it's conflict within a community, whether it's a global conflict as such, is people who hold mental corrupt data of hostility or fear need to enter the healing process. Otherwise, they will corrupt their mind's image of somebody and have another reason to go to war. And it's just time for that core stuff to be healed. And you go back to Yeshua, he put this out 2,000 years ago, and as a physicist, he said a little leavening leavens the whole loaf. He wasn't talking about bread. The leavening is the critical mass that if enough people will actually do the work so that they show up in their own physiology as active present love, then that critical mass will transform the whole of humanity. Energetically will become the leavening. And that's basically why we're doing what we're doing, and why our commitment is to make it available. Whether people have money or not is irrelevant, but to make the tools available so that healing occurs rather than just symptom resolution. You know, in the realm of medicine, you know, most people think drugs heal. Drugs don't heal. Nobody's ever been healed by a drug, because every drug is a disease disguised as a cure. Yes, if I put it in my structure, it will ameliorate this set of symptoms, but it will exacerbate 10 other sets of symptoms. You know, you listen to the review as they're showing people, you know, dancing through the field of beautiful flowers, getting ready to go and have a great time with family or what have you. And in the meantime, the announcer's reading about all the body parts that are going to fall off and all of the so-called side effects to that drug. They're all diseases. There's no such thing as a side effect. They're diseases. And every drug causes diseases. Doesn't mean don't ever use the drug, because for handling symptoms that can be useful, but you're never going to get rid of the disease process until you do the healing work. And it's precisely the same in terms of human conflict. Until people do the healing work, yeah, we can do the symptom suppression. Oh, we'll do a Camp David Accord, and this person will agree with that person, and they'll do some compensation. And look at that, see, we solved it all, but there was no healing involved. And so it's going to rear, you know, anybody who never learns how to go inside their own unconscious mind and clean up the mess gets to live the title of my book. Why is this happening to me again? Or people will title it, why are they doing this to me again? Or even, why am I doing this to myself again? Because until you clean those dynamics up, it's going to end up being drama and trauma again. So I hope that fits and makes sense. Any other thoughts? We've got about 60 seconds left. The phone just announced in my ear. All right, well, I'm going to say thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hope you have the best year yet of your eternal life. And